The galactic underestimation. The galaxy had seen many races rise and fall across the ages, and every species carried its own reputation, forged by war, commerce, or politics. The Dravari were known for their iron fleets that crushed resistance wherever. They sailed the Salkori for their cunning manipulations in the grand councils of the stars, and the Chiron for their ruthless efficiency in battle. But when humanity finally stepped beyond its home system and entered the stage of galactic civilization, they were greeted not with fear or respect but with laughter. To the elder species, humanity appeared weak, fragile, and hopelessly naive. The first ambassadors from Earth walked into the shining halls of the Galactic Council with their nervous smiles and carefully pressed uniforms, and they were met with amused stares. Their bodies looked small and unimpressive compared to the towering insectoid warriors or the scaled reptilian dignitaries. Their eyes betrayed emotions too easily. Their voices cracked with passion when speaking of peace and cooperation. To the galaxy, they seemed more like children pretending to play at politics than a species ready to claim its place among the stars. Reports circulated quickly through the networks that humanity would never last long in the harsh realities of interstellar power. Their homeworld was a death world, yes, but that detail was dismissed as exaggeration. The Council scholars claimed that Earth's hardships only made the humans reckless rather than resilient. The humans spoke of cooperation, yet carried scars from countless wars among themselves, and so the other species declared them unstable and destined to fail. Many races quietly wondered how long before humanity would beg for protection from some stronger neighbor, or be wiped away in their first serious conflict. Yet even as they laughed, humanity worked quietly. Earth had been underestimated for centuries, even by its own kind. The galaxy could not see the layers of human culture forged in fire and hunger and endless struggle. They could not understand how many times humanity had faced extinction by its own hands or by nature, and how many times it had adapted and survived. To them, the humans were weak, but in truth, the humans were waiting, listening, and learning. The first sign of tension came not long after humanity's admission to the Council. A powerful empire known as the Vorkai began expanding aggressively at the edge of human space. The Vorkai were feared across the stars, their fleets vast and merciless, their appetite for conquest legendary. When they looked at Earth, they saw an easy prize, a cluster of worlds rich in resources and defended by a species no one respected. Whispers spread quickly that humanity would fold at the first sign of Vorkai warships. After all, what chance could the newcomers possibly have against such a brutal force? Inside the council chambers, debates broke out. Some species urged caution, telling the Vorkai that attacking humans would destabilize the region. Others smirked behind their masks and quietly supported the aggression, believing it would remove a weak and noisy species from the table without costing them anything. Humanity was given no seat in these private councils, no voice in the decision. Their warnings were ignored and their pleas for unity dismissed. When the news reached Earth, the reaction was quiet at first. The diplomats smiled, still calm, still polite, promising that humanity wished for peace. The Council interpreted this as fear and weakness, but back on Earth and across its colonies, the gears of war began to turn. Factories shifted, production fleets were recalled, soldiers were mobilized, and ancient instincts stirred in the hearts of billions. Humanity did not shout or rage or boast. Humanity prepared. The galaxy thought they saw through the humans. They believed these small, fragile beings were incapable of holding their own against a great empire. Yet beneath the surface, humanity carried something the elder races could never measure. They carried the memory of firestorm cities turned to ash oceans stained with blood wars that had nearly broken them countless times, and every single time they had endured. The Vorkai thought they were about to crush insects. What they were about to awaken was something far older and far more dangerous than they could imagine. And so the stage was set. The galaxy underestimated humanity, and humanity allowed it. The war had not yet begun, but when it did, the galaxy would discover that the soft voices and fragile smiles of humans hid the teeth of predators who had learned long ago that survival was never given freely. It was always taken. The first sparks of conflict. The first Vorkai fleets appeared at the edge of human space with the confidence of predators circling a wounded prey. Their ships were vast, angular constructs bristling with weapons and armored in alloys forged from centuries of conquest. Each vessel carried the weight of thousands of victories etched into its hull like scars of pride. To the Vorkai, this was not war, it was routine, and the humans were just another mark on their long path of domination. Reports of their movements reached the Galactic Council, and few reacted with alarm. Many species shrugged, dismissing the affair as inevitable. The humans had been warned, they said humanity was not prepared, and now the price would be paid. Some even welcomed the coming storm, eager to see the noisy newcomers silenced. Back on Earth, the atmosphere was entirely different. The news was carried across every channel, every colony, and every fleet. Humanity did not panic, and they did not collapse as the Council had expected. Instead, a silence swept across the species, a silence of grim understanding. Humanity had always known this day would come, whether from within or from without. It was not the first time humanity had faced an enemy that believed they were weak. The difference now was scale. The galaxy itself was watching. Factories that had once produced trade goods and civilian transports shifted overnight to military output. Orbital shipyards glowed with the fires of accelerated construction. Engineers worked day and night to retrofit ships that were once exploration craft into war-ready vessels. The colonies rallied behind Earth not with fear, but with resolve. Veterans of Earth's endless conflicts came forward to serve again, bringing with them experience carved into their very bones. Young men and women who had never seen war volunteered in numbers so great that the training facilities overflowed. Humanity had been fractured many times in its history by borders, by ideologies, by greed, but the threat of extinction had always united them, and now unity burned brighter than ever before. The Vorkai sent demands before their fleets advanced. They ordered humanity to surrender their outer colonies and submit to permanent tribute. The message dripped with arrogance, promising mercy if the humans complied, and total destruction if they resisted. In the council chambers, the ambassadors of the elder races expected humanity to beg for time or to plead for peace. Instead, the human ambassador stood calmly, his voice steady and without hesitation. He thanked the Vorkai for their generous offer, then rejected it completely. He declared that humanity would not surrender a single world, nor pay a single credit in tribute. For a moment the chamber fell silent, not out of respect, but out of disbelief. The Vorkai envoy laughed openly at the response. He promised that soon human screams would echo across the stars and that Earth itself would kneel before the Empire. The Council recorded the exchange, and many members privately agreed with the Vorkai. Humanity had just signed its death warrant, they said. But what none of them understood was that this defiance was not a bluff, it was a declaration of intent. Humanity did not posture or boast because it did not need to. Humanity simply acted. When the Vorkai fleet finally crossed into human space, they expected an easy conquest. Their strategists predicted that human defenses would collapse within weeks, perhaps days. What they encountered instead was resistance, unlike anything they had prepared for. Human ships fought not with polished precision, but with feral adaptability. They used tactics that were chaotic, unpredictable, and terrifying. They turned civilian freighters into weapon platforms, hiding them among debris fields before striking like ambush predators. They detonated their own reactors rather than allow capture, taking whole squadrons of Vorkai with them in firestorms. The first battles were bloody and uneven, yet they left the Vorkai shaken. They had won, of course, for their numbers and firepower were overwhelming, but the cost had been higher than expected. Their commanders dismissed it as luck, as desperation from a doomed species. But the soldiers who survived whispered differently. They spoke of human pilots who refused to eject even as their ships burned, of Marines who fought on with broken bones and shattered bodies, of strategies that seemed born not of fear, but of some deep primal drive to win, no matter the cost. Kiyuar. Council received fragmented reports and confusion spread. Humanity had not collapsed, they had not begged, they had not fled. Instead, they fought with a savagery that seemed to defy reason. The laughter that once filled the chambers grew quieter, replaced by unease. A few voices began to question whether humanity had been underestimated after all. But for most, it was still too early to believe. Surely the Vorkai would crush them once the full weight of the Empire descended. On Earth, however, no one believed they were doomed. The first sparks of conflict had lit a fire across the species. Every loss only hardened their resolve, every fallen soldier became a story of defiance, and every victory, no matter how small, was celebrated as proof that they could stand against giants. Humanity was not fighting for glory or expansion, they were fighting for survival, and survival had always been the greatest strength of mankind. The galaxy had only seen the beginning, humanity's first strike. The first clashes had shown the Vorkai that humanity would not fold easily, but even then the Empire believed victory was certain. Their fleets pressed deeper into human space, expecting that each step forward would crush resistance until nothing remained. Yet what they found was that every world, every system, and every fleet they touched fought with increasing fury. It was as if the humans learned from every defeat, adapting in days what other species took years to comprehend. The Vorkai were hunters, but humanity did not act like prey. Humanity studied the hunters and began to turn their own methods against them. In the shadowed belts of the outer colonies, human fleets began to gather, not in grand formations like the Vorkai, but in scattered hidden packs. They watched and waited, allowing the Empire to grow comfortable in its advance. Then came the first strike, a coordinated assault across multiple sectors, carried out with precision that stunned even those who planned it. Civilian freighters, stripped and reforged into gunships, slipped past Vorkai patrols and unleashed firestorms on supply convoys. Orbital stations that had been declared abandoned exploded with hidden charges, crippling entire battle groups. Even asteroid fields became weapons as humans rigged them with drives and sent them hurtling into enemy lines. The Vorkai commanders could not understand how a species so young and supposedly weak could execute operations of such scale. Their reports tried to explain the failures as chance or sabotage by outside forces, but the truth was impossible to deny. Humanity had struck with intent, and it had drawn blood. For the first time in generations, Vorkai fleets were forced to retreat not by an equal empire, but by the very species the galaxy had mocked. Across the council chambers, the news spread like fire. Ambassadors argued late into the night, some insisting the reports were exaggerated, others claiming they had always known humans were more dangerous than they appeared. Yet the faces of the Vorkai envoys told the truth. Their arrogance had cracked. Behind their sneers and harsh words there was frustration and something more unsettling, fear. On the human side, the victories were not clean. Each strike had cost lives and ships. Families mourned sons and daughters lost in the void, and commanders wept over the sacrifices they ordered. Yet despite the pain, morale soared. For every colony saved, for every enemy fleet broken, the human spirit grew stronger. Broadcast from the front carried stories of pilots who refused to eject even when their ships were torn apart, Marines who fought until their last breath, and engineers who detonated themselves inside enemy ships to ensure victory. These stories spread faster than propaganda, and the galaxy began to whisper that humans were not merely stubborn, they were relentless. The Vorkai soon learned a lesson that others had forgotten. Humanity had been born on a death world where survival was never guaranteed and where danger never slept. Every storm, every predator, every plague had shaped the species into something that refused to quit. In war, this nature became their greatest weapon. Where other species fought wars like games of strategy, moving pieces across a board, humans fought as if each battle was life itself. They embraced chaos, turned desperation into strength, and found ways to use every weakness of their enemy. One particular battle became legend in those early days. The Vorkai attempted to seize the colony of Harrow's Reach, a mining world of little strategic value, but rich in symbolism as one of humanity's earliest off-world settlements. The Vorkai expected an easy conquest, but when their fleets entered orbit, they were met with silence. They believed the humans had fled until hundreds of hidden rail batteries emerged from the surface and unleashed a storm of fire. While the Vorkai-reeled human warships emerged from behind the system's moons, striking with such ferocity that the Empire lost more ships in a single day than in years of conquest. The humans did not hold the system for long, and many of their defenders perished, but the message was written in blood across the stars. Humanity would not surrender, and they could wound even the greatest predator. In the aftermath, the Vorkai tightened their grip and prepared a full-scale invasion determined to end the defiance before it spread. Yet in trying to crush humanity, they had already given the species exactly what it needed. The humans no longer fought merely for survival. They fought with purpose and with proof that their enemies could bleed. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now the galaxy watched in silence as the war shifted from survival to something greater. The turning point. The Vorkai Empire had expected the first victories of humanity to be sparks that would burn out quickly. They believed that once the full weight of their fleets pressed into human space, the resistance would crumble and the colonies would beg for mercy. But the sparks did not fade. Instead, they spread and grew into a fire that burned, hotter with each passing battle. What the Vorkai could not understand was that humanity did not cling to one strategy or one pattern. Every encounter reshaped them. Every defeat taught them lessons. Every narrow victory became the seed of something greater. On Earth and across, the colony's scientists and engineers worked in feverish determination. They studied captured wrecks of Vorkai ships and tore apart their weapon systems piece by piece. Human ingenuity had always thrived on taking what was broken or foreign and making it their own. Now this instinct became a weapon. Within months, human fleets began fielding hybrid technology systems built from Vorkai designs, but modified in ways their creators had never imagined. Shielding was reinforced by brute force solutions. Reactors were pushed beyond safe limits, and weapons were reconfigured to deliver strikes that the Empire had never prepared to defend. What shocked the galaxy most was not the speed of this innovation, but the audacity of it. Other races had faced the Vorkai for centuries, and none had dared to tamper with their technology. The Empire was considered untouchable. To challenge them meant ruin. Yet humanity showed no hesitation. They treated every captured system as a puzzle to be solved, and every weakness as an opportunity to exploit. Their ability to adapt became the heart of their strength, and soon battles began to turn in ways the Vorkai had never experienced. One engagement near the Epsilon Belt became a symbol of this transformation. A Vorkai fleet entered the system, expecting to rout a small human defense force. Instead, the humans revealed a new weapon, crafted from captured Vorkai plasma cores, wired into experimental rail platforms. The result was a cannon so powerful it cut through the Empire's battleships in a single shot. The Vorkai retreated in shock, leaving behind wreckage that drifted silently as proof that the balance of power had shifted. Stories of the battle spread faster than the war itself, and the galaxy whispered that humans had done the impossible. But it was not only technology that set them apart. It was their will to bend themselves into whatever shape victory demanded. Where other species fought wars by rigid codes and traditions, humanity treated war as survival. Soldiers endured conditions that alien armies would never tolerate. Pilots flew missions with bodies broken and bloodied, refusing to rest until victory was won. Commanders changed strategies mid-battle, taking risks so reckless they seemed suicidal. Yet somehow these risks often succeeded. The unpredictability of humanity became a weapon even more dangerous than their guns. The Council observed these changes with growing unease. At first, many still hoped the Vorkai would crush the humans quickly, but now the whispers grew louder. If humanity could rise against the Empire, what else might they achieve? If a young, fragile species could humble conquerors, then perhaps no power in the galaxy was safe from them. Some ambassadors began to speak in cautious tones about the need to support humanity, while others plotted in fear of what might come if the humans survived. On the human side, the cost of this turning point was steep. Entire fleets were lost, colonies burned, and countless lives were taken. Yet every loss was transformed into a lesson. Humanity did not weep in despair, they grieved, then sharpened their resolve. Families sent more volunteers to the front. Colonies fortified their defenses. Every citizen understood that this was not just a war, it was the very test of their existence among the stars. For the Vorkai, the realization came slowly but surely. They were no longer facing a prey species. They were facing an enemy that grew stronger with every strike against it. The Empire began to feel fear, and that fear grew into anger. The Vorkai vowed to unleash the full force of their armadas to end humanity once and for all. Yet in their rage they failed to see what the galaxy had already begun to notice. This was no longer the same species that had once walked nervously into the council chambers. This was something new, something forged in fire and sharpened by pain. Humanity had turned the tide of war, and nothing would ever be the same again. The fear sets. In the Vorkai had believed that unleashing the full weight of their armadas would erase the defiance of humanity and restore their reputation as unstoppable conquerors. Their fleets spread like dark clouds across human space, and their commanders spoke of final victory. Yet the war did not bend as they expected. For every world they burned, another human colony rose in defiance. For every fleet they shattered, human forces struck from the shadows with new strategies that made the Empire bleed in ways it had never known. The galaxy watched, and something began to shift. What was once laughter at the idea of human strength became whispers of dread. The first stories came from soldiers who had fought humans face to face. Vorkai warriors returned from the front trembling with memories they could not shake. They spoke of humans who kept fighting even after wounds that should have killed them. They described men and women who dragged themselves across battlefields with shattered limbs, only to rise again and strike down enemies with eyes burning like fire. They spoke of soldiers who charged into hopeless battles not for orders or glory, but because they refused to let their comrades fall alone. At first these reports were dismissed as exaggerations, but the stories multiplied, and soon even the most loyal commanders began to wonder if the humans were truly mortal in the same sense as other species. Among the council chambers, the shift was more subtle. Ambassadors who had once scoffed at humanity now spoke in hushed tones about containment and caution. They debated whether humanity should be aided or abandoned, but underneath their words lay a common fear. If humanity survived this war, they would no longer be a small, weak species begging for a place among the stars. They would become a predator no empire could easily control. The laughter was gone, and in its place was silence heavy with unease. In human space, the war had carved deep scars, yet those scars only made them stronger. The sight of burning cities and fallen colonies did not break their spirit. Instead, it hardened it. Civilians joined militias and turned entire towns into fortresses. Farmers became snipers defending their fields as if they were ancient battlegrounds. Children grew up with the sound of war overhead and learned quickly that survival meant courage. Entire generations were being forged in fire, and the galaxy began to realize that even if humanity were broken, the ashes would rise again fiercer than before. One infamous battle added to the growing fear. On the ruined world of Taros, a small human garrison was surrounded by 3 times their number of Vorkai troops. The Empire expected a swift slaughter, but what followed became a nightmare. The humans dug into the rubble and fought street by street, turning every building into a trap, every shadow into an ambush. The battle lasted for weeks until the Vorkai finally withdrew, leaving the planet in ruins but failing to break the defenders. Survivors later told tales of humans who fought with half their bodies, destroyed humans who screamed defiance as they leapt onto enemy tanks armed only with explosives, and humans who smiled through bloodied faces as if daring their enemies to keep coming. The Vorkai soldiers began calling them Deathwalkers, for they fought as if death itself walked beside them. Across the galaxy, these stories spread faster than the war itself. Traders whispered them in ports, smugglers repeated them in shadowed taverns, and diplomats shared them in fearful conversations. Humanity was no longer seen as a fragile race, but as something far more dangerous. They were predators hidden behind fragile smiles, a species that did not understand surrender. The Vorkai Empire grew frustrated by its inability to crush them and began to tighten its grip with cruelty. Entire colonies were burned to send a message. Yet even this backfired. Each atrocity only stoked the human fire and gave them more reason to fight. Where other species might have broken under such horrors, humanity became sharper, more ruthless, more determined. It was in these days that the galaxy truly began to fear, not because humanity had the strongest fleets or the most advanced weapons, but because they had shown that nothing could break their will. Every loss became fuel, every wound became a lesson, and every death became a vow of vengeance. The Vorkai had wanted to teach the humans fear, but instead they had taught the galaxy to fear humanity. And so the war dragged on not as a campaign of conquest, but as a spreading legend. The galaxy now spoke of humans not as weaklings or fools, but as predators, rising from the ashes of their own destruction. The Council could no longer laugh, for they had begun to realize the truth. Humanity was not fighting simply to survive. Humanity was fighting to prove that no species could ever again afford to underestimate them. Humanity strikes back. Humanity had suffered more than any other species in living memory, yet the suffering had only sharpened their resolve. The fleets that had once scrambled to defend worlds now sailed into enemy space with a precision that stunned their enemies. Vorkai commanders who had expected weak humans fleeing before their fire now faced organized forces that struck like lightning and disappeared before counterattacks could be launched. Intelligence that had once underestimated human tactics was now forced to admit that every action was deliberate, every strike calculated and deadly. Each human soldier carried not just weapons, but an unbroken will that seemed to give them power, beyond reason. The first major offensive that shook the galaxy began in the sector of Narel, where human forces launched an ambush on a massive Vorkai armada. They struck at night when sensors were blind, using stealth craft to weave through asteroid fields that other species avoided. Each ship seemed to appear from nowhere, firing on targets with surgical precision before vanishing into darkness. Entire squadrons were destroyed before the Vorkai could comprehend what had happened. Commanders who survived the attack returned in silence, haunted by the sudden realization that humans did not play by known rules, and that their bravery bordered on madness. Meanwhile, on planetary fronts, humans took what had been considered lost worlds and turned them into fortresses of resistance. Ruins became battlegrounds, but also laboratories of adaptation, where every destroyed building taught them new ways to fight. Civilians trained alongside soldiers, and even children learned tactics that would have baffled veteran generals from other species. Farmers became snipers, miners dug traps, and engineers invented weapons from scrap metal and salvage technology. The galaxy could not keep up with the speed of human innovation, and the Vorkai were forced to retreat from territory they thought secure. Stories of human audacity traveled faster than fleets. On the mining planet of Korath, humans facing a blockade rigged explosive devices inside transport ships and set off chain reactions that destroyed an entire squadron of Vorkai cruisers. On the ice world of Vyrath, a lone human commander led a group of civilians through blizzards and frozen valleys to ambush enemy supply lines, and returned with prisoners and supplies that were thought impossible to capture. Every victory inspired another, and the legend of humanity grew until the whispers of fear had become a chorus of terror across the galaxy. The Vorkai tried to retaliate with their elite warriors, yet each encounter taught them the same lesson. Humans adapted with a speed that defied expectation. They learned from mistakes without hesitation and used the lessons of defeat to fuel their next success. Where one human soldier fell, 10 others took his place, and the story of his courage spread among comrades, creating a network of morale that no empire could break. They fought with minds as sharp as their weapons and hearts as unyielding as steel. Diplomats and spies began reporting that entire sectors were reconsidering alliances, because humans could no longer be ignored. The idea of negotiating with the species that had once been dismissed as primitive became a necessity. Even the most hardened warlords who had never experienced humanity firsthand began to fear what they represented. Not just strength or cunning, but a relentless drive that seemed unstoppable. Amidst all this, humans did not celebrate with arrogance or cruelty. Each strike and victory carried the memory of those who had fallen and the hope of protecting what remained of their people. They fought not to dominate, but to survive, and to ensure that no one would ever again underestimate them. The galaxy began to understand that the humans were not merely a species of fighters, but a force of nature that could not be contained. And so as human fleets advanced deep into enemy territory and reclaimed lost worlds, they left behind a trail of awe and terror. Stories of their exploits were passed along star routes and in council chambers. Every empire realized that the humans were no longer the underdogs that could be ignored or dismissed. They were predators with hearts of fire and minds that refused to yield. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a force that would change the course of history forever, and no one could tell what came next or how far humanity could push when they refused to back down. Humanity commands the galaxy. The galaxy had long believed that humans were unpredictable but harmless. Now they had seen the full measure of human capability, and fear spread like wildfire across star systems. Every fleet that had once laughed at the audacity of human pilots now trembled at the thought of facing them in combat. Entire sectors surrendered without firing a shot when news of approaching human forces reached them. Planets that had once resisted human colonization opened their gates and offered alliances and resources willingly, for even the smallest chance to avoid human wrath. Humans had become the axis upon which galactic politics spun, and their reputation for ingenuity and relentless courage preceded them across the stars. On the battlefield, humans moved like shadows that carried storms. Their strategies were not just clever but almost prescient, anticipating enemy maneuvers before they were made. Forkai warlords who had boasted about centuries of military dominance now found themselves outmatched by a species that had learned to fight with every lesson of history and every ounce of instinct. Entire fleets that had been considered the pride of empires were shattered not just by technology, but by the coordination and daring of human soldiers who refused to retreat. Each victory added to the legend of humanity as diplomats and commanders recorded their movements and wondered if anything could stop them. Humanity's rise was not without sacrifice. Every battle demanded courage that few other species could comprehend, and loss was heavy. Yet it strengthened them instead of breaking them. Every fallen soldier became a symbol for others to follow, a story that inspired millions across worlds. Civilians who had survived invasions joined militias and resistance forces, bringing their skills and resolve to the fight. Even in the darkest hours, hope never faltered, because humans fought not only to survive, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. This unyielding spirit became their true weapon, surpassing any fleet or armament, and the galaxy began to realize that humans did not fight for glory or conquest, but because they were unbreakable in their will and impossible to predict in their action. The final decisive campaign came when humans advanced toward the heart of the Vorkai Empire. Worlds that had once seemed impenetrable crumbled under the assault, as humans combined precision strikes with unparalleled tactics. Space battles were fought with a speed and fluidity that left enemy strategists bewildered. On planetary fronts, humans engaged in combat that was brutal yet brilliant, using terrain, weather, and even the behavior of wildlife to their advantage. It seemed as if no force in the galaxy could withstand the combination of human intellect, courage, and adaptability. Allies who had once feared them now fought alongside humans, and the united front became an unstoppable tidal wave that reshaped the balance of power across countless star systems. When the dust of battle settled, humans did not celebrate with arrogance or tyranny. Instead, they offered terms that ensured stability and justice. Empires that had once hunted them now recognized the wisdom of cooperation over conflict. The galaxy learned that humans were not conquerors, but protectors, fierce and relentless, when provoked, yet capable of mercy and strategic diplomacy. Stories of human courage spread not just in fleets and battlefields, but in the halls of governments and schools across species, teaching lessons about resilience, determination, and the extraordinary power of the human spirit. The war that had seemed impossible to survive became the story of humanity's ascendancy. Every soldier, civilian, and leader knew that their strength lay not just in their weapons, but in their unity and unwillingness to accept defeat. And as humans looked across the stars, they understood that the galaxy had underestimated them once, and it would never happen again. Their name became synonymous with fear to their enemies and hope to their allies, a legend forged in fire and battle that would endure for generations. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a force that transcended ordinary limits, and the humans, who had once been dismissed as insignificant, now stood as the defining power of an era whose stories would echo forever across the stars. The galaxy had changed forever, and humans stood at the center of that transformation. Their presence no longer a question of survival, but a symbol of power and possibility. Entire star systems whispered their name in awe and fear. The lessons of the war engraved into the hearts and minds of every species. The humans who had once been underestimated had rewritten the rules of existence with courage that bordered on legend and ingenuity, that defied comprehension. Across planets that had once resisted them, the signs of human resilience and innovation became monuments to a species that refused to be ignored. Nothing seemed impossible for humans, and even the most formidable adversaries came to understand that victory against them required not just strength but imagination, and the kind of resolve that only humans could summon. The war had been the proving ground, and humanity had emerged not just victorious but transformed. Their society had evolved to embrace unity and diversity in a way that made them unstoppable in conflict and unmatched in diplomacy. Humans built alliances with former enemies not through coercion, but through respect and the demonstration of their unwavering principles. Every hand extended in friendship carried the weight of a shared understanding that humanity fought not for dominion, but for justice and survival, and those who joined them were part of something far greater than any single world or fleet. Their technology advanced in leaps that astounded the galaxy, yet it was never used to intimidate but to protect, to innovate, to explore, and to challenge the limits of what life could endure and achieve. Legends of human soldiers and commanders spread faster than any fleet across the stars, their tactics studied for centuries, their courage immortalized in stories and songs, and the very idea of human adaptability became a benchmark by which all civilizations measured themselves. Every battle became a tale of creativity, courage, and relentless determination. The victories that had seemed impossible now served as examples of what a species could achieve when it refused to yield, when it turned fear into fuel and chaos into strategy. Young beings of countless species looked to humans as models of endurance and inspiration, knowing that the impossible was never permanent, and that the strength of spirit could outweigh the most advanced weapons or the largest armies. Yet humanity never rested on their triumphs. Their eyes were always on the horizon, seeking new frontiers, not for conquest but for understanding, new allies, not for manipulation but for shared progress. And every step forward carried the lessons of the past embedded in their culture, the mistakes learned, the sacrifices made, and the victories won. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a civilization that combined wisdom, courage, and relentless willpower in a way that ensured that their story would echo for millennia. And as humans looked across the endless expanse of stars, they felt neither arrogance nor hubris, only the quiet satisfaction of having survived, having endured, and having transformed the very fabric of the galaxy into a place where the underestimated could become the undefeatable, where the impossible could become inevitable, and where the human spirit had proven that it was the greatest force in existence, a force that would continue to shine and guide civilizations across the cosmos for generations yet to come. The galaxy would never forget the name of humanity. The species that had been dismissed had become the standard of excellence, the embodiment of courage and ingenuity, the very definition of resilience and potential, and in every corner of space, the legend of humans endured, shaping futures, inspiring generations, and reminding all that the underestimated could rise to become the unstoppable, and that humanity had done exactly that. The end.